Admiral Thesson stood on the command bridge of his warship and looked at the blue planet below. It was a small world, nothing special about it, just another primitive species waiting to serve the Velkari Dominion. The Velkari had ruled this part of the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved dozens of species. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and black, perfect for seeing in the dim light of their home sun. They believed they were the greatest species in the universe. Every conquest proved them right. "Admiral," said his second officer, "the fleet is in position. 200 warships ready for invasion." Thesson nodded slowly. He had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. They would destroy the primitive defenses. They would kill anyone who resisted. They would take the survivors as slaves. Simple, clean, efficient. "What do we know about this species, Ishorn?" Sorry, he asked. The science officer pulled up information on the main screen. "They call themselves humans. They have only reached their own moon. Their weapons use chemical explosions. Very primitive. They fight wars among themselves constantly. Violent creatures," Thesson said with disgust. "They will need strong control. There is one concern, Admiral." The science officer hesitated. "Their planet is classified as a Class 12 death world." Thesson turned to look at him. A death world was a planet where conditions were extremely hostile to life. High gravity, dangerous predators, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures. The scale went from 1 to 15, and anything above 10 was considered almost impossible for intelligent life. "Class 12? Thesson repeated. "How did they even survive?" "Unknown, Admiral. The planet has thousands of species that can kill. The weather changes violently. The ground shakes and opens. Water falls from the sky. They have diseases that kill millions. Yet they number 7 billion. 7 billion! That was a lot of slaves." Thesson smiled. "Their difficult world made them strong workers. That is good for us. Begin the invasion." The Velkari fleet descended on Earth like a storm of fire. The humans were not ready. How could they be? They had never seen aliens before. They had barely left their own planet. Their satellites detected the fleet only hours before it arrived. Their leaders tried to communicate, tried to understand, tried to make peace. The Velkari did not want peace. They wanted obedience. The first attacks destroyed every major military base on the planet. Nuclear missiles rose from the ground to fight back, but Velkari shields stopped them easily. Human fighter jets flew bravely into battle, but they were like insects against the massive warships. They died by the thousands. Thesson watched from orbit as cities burned. New York, Beijing, Moscow, London. One by one, the great cities of Earth fell silent. The humans sent radio messages begging for mercy. They asked what they had done wrong. They offered to surrender. But surrender was not enough. The Velkari wanted to break them completely. A broken species never rebelled. A broken species worked until they died. This was the way of the Dominion. Ground troops landed across the world. Tall gray soldiers in black armor marched through the burning streets. They expected the humans to run. They expected them to hide. They expected them to give up. They were wrong. The humans fought back with everything they had. Soldiers with simple rifles attacked tanks. Civilians threw stones at armored warriors. Old men and young children stood together against enemies from the stars. They knew they would die. They fought anyway. Thesson received reports that confused him. His soldiers were dying in numbers he had never seen before. Humans attacked at night when Velkari eyes worked poorly. They hid in tunnels and attacked from behind. They put bombs in dead bodies. They crashed vehicles into supply lines. They fought with a fury that seemed almost insane. In one city called Stalingrad, a single building held against Velkari attacks for 3 weeks. When the soldiers finally broke through, they found only dead humans and a message painted on the wall in blood: "We do not surrender." In a country called Switzerland, humans collapsed mountains onto invasion forces. In a place called Vietnam, they turned jungles into death traps. In lands called Afghanistan and Finland, they showed that they had been fighting superior enemies for their entire history. But courage could not defeat technology. Bravery could not stop orbital bombardment. Love for their world could not block plasma weapons. After 18 months of war, Earth fell. 7 billion humans became 800 million. The rest died fighting or starved or were executed for resistance. The survivors were gathered into massive labor camps across the planet. They would mine metals for Valkyrie ships. They would build machines for Valkyrie comfort. They would serve until they died. Admiral Thesson walked through the ruins of a city called Paris. A famous tower made of metal had fallen, bent and broken. Human bodies lay in the streets, many of them still holding weapons. Even in death, their faces showed anger rather than fear. One of his officers approached. "Admiral, the planet is secured. Resistance groups remain in some areas, but they are small and weak. Pacification is nearly complete." "How many soldiers did we lose?" Thesson asked. The officer looked uncomfortable. "Final count is still being calculated, Admiral. Current estimates are 3 million. 3 million. Thesson could not believe it. He had conquered dozens of worlds. He had never lost more than a few thousand soldiers on any of them. These primitive humans with their chemical weapons and stone buildings had killed 3 million Valkyrie warriors. He looked at a dead human female nearby. She was small, barely reaching his chest. She had been shot many times, but she had died facing forward, a crude metal blade in her hand. What kind of creature attacked armored soldiers with a knife? "This species is dangerous," his officer said quietly. Thesson shook his head. "They were dangerous. Now they are defeated. In 1 generation, they will forget how to fight. In 2 generations, they will forget they ever had a world of their own. This is the way of the Dominion." He filed his report to the High Council. Threat neutralized, species suitable for manual labor. Recommends standard pacification protocols. But as his ship left orbit, he looked back at the blue planet one last time. Something about this conquest felt different. Something felt wrong. These humans had lost, but they had not seemed defeated. Even as they died, they had smiled at him with a strange look in their eyes. It was the look of someone who knew something you did not. Thesson pushed the thought away. They were just primitives. They were just slaves now. What could they possibly know? He would spend the last moments of his life, years later, finally understanding the answer. They knew how to wait. 5 years had passed since the fall of Earth. Kethra was a Valkyrie overseer at Mining Complex 17, located in what the humans once called Australia. His job was simple: make sure the human slaves worked hard and caused no trouble. For 3 years, he had done this job well. The humans dug metals from the ground. They loaded it onto transport ships. They did as they were told, but lately something felt wrong. Kethra stood on a metal platform above the mining pit and watched the humans work. They swung their tools in a steady rhythm. They moved rocks from one place to another. They looked tired and broken, just like slaves should look, but they were working too well. Production had increased by 40% in the last 6 months. The humans made fewer mistakes. They finished tasks faster. They even helped each other without being ordered to. This should have made Kethra happy. Instead, it made him afraid. He had studied humans. He knew their psychology. Happy humans worked poorly because they dreamed of better things. Sad humans worked poorly because they had no hope. But these humans worked perfectly while showing no emotion at all. Except sometimes, when they thought no one was watching, they smiled. Kethra had learned that human smiles meant many things. They smiled when happy. They smiled when nervous. They smiled when lying. And they smiled when they were planning something terrible. He reported his concerns to his superiors. They laughed at him. "They are broken," they said. "They have accepted their place. Stop worrying about nothing." But Kethra could not stop worrying, because when he walked through the work camps at night, he heard something strange. The humans made sounds with their mouths that were too quiet for Valkyrie ears to understand. They moved their lips without making noise. They tapped their fingers on surfaces in patterns that seemed random. The humans were communicating, and the Valkyrie could not hear them. 1,000 kilometers away, in a bunker beneath the ruins of São Paulo, a woman named Elena Vasquez looked at a wall covered with maps and photographs. Elena was 42 years old. Before the invasion, she had been a commander in the United Nations Special Forces. She had fought in wars across the planet. She had survived the fall of Earth by hiding in mountains and killing any Valkyrie soldier foolish enough to follow her. Now she led the Whisper. The Whisper was a network of resistance fighters spread across every continent on Earth. They had no radios that the Valkyrie could detect. They had no computers that could be hacked. They communicated through methods the aliens could not understand or track. Human whispers were too low for Valkyrie ears. Human writing was hidden in drawings that looked like nothing. Human codes were built into songs and children's games. Workers in different camps sang the same songs, and the rhythm carried messages across thousands of kilometers. The Valkyrie never suspected. How could they? They believed humans were primitive. They believed humans were broken. They believed their own technology saw everything. They were blind. Elena touched a photograph on the wall. It showed a young man in a laboratory coat. His name was Dr. James Chen, and he was the most important person on Earth. 3 years ago, resistance fighters had attacked a Valkyrie transport ship. They had captured something valuable, an engineer, not a soldier, not a guard, but someone who actually understood how Valkyrie technology worked. They had also captured data cores containing thousands of technical documents. Dr. Chen had spent 3 years studying that information. At first it seemed impossible. The technology was thousands of years more advanced than anything on Earth. Understanding it would take centuries. But Dr. Chen was not alone. Through the Whisper, he connected with scientists hidden all over the planet, mathematicians in hidden villages, engineers in mining camps, physicists who worked as slaves during the day and studied stolen data at night. Thousands of brilliant minds, all working in secret on the same problem. And last week, Dr. Chen had sent a message that changed everything. We understand their engines. We can build our own. Elena read the message again and again. It seemed impossible. Humans had barely reached their own moon before the invasion. Now they were going to build starships? But then she remembered something her grandmother had told her. Humans do not grow strong in easy times. We grow strong when everything is against us. The Valkyrie had given humanity the greatest challenge in its history, and humanity was rising to meet it. Elena called a meeting of the Whisper's leadership. They came from every part of the world, communicating through hidden channels that took days to pass messages. Former generals, former scientists, former politicians. All of them now worked as slaves, invisible to their masters. The time is coming, Elena told them. In 1 year, maybe 2, we will be ready to strike. But we cannot do this alone. She showed them something else that the resistance had discovered. The Valkyrie Dominion controlled many species, not just humans. Dozens of alien races had been conquered and enslaved over thousands of years. They all hated the Valkyrie. They all dreamed of freedom. We have made contact with resistance groups on 12 other worlds, Elena said. They are afraid to act because they believe they are alone. We will show them they are not. A man from the European sector spoke up. If we fail, the Valkyrie will kill everyone, every human on Earth. Elena nodded. I know. This is not a choice between safety and danger. It is a choice between dying as slaves and dying as warriors. I know which I prefer. The room was silent. Everyone understood what she was saying. If they fought and lost, humanity would end. But if they did not fight, humanity was already dead. A species without hope, without freedom, without a future, was not really alive at all. One by one, the leaders of the Whisper agreed. They would prepare for war. In the mining camps, the work songs changed slightly. New rhythms appeared. New words were hidden in old melodies. The message spread across the planet in weeks. We rise soon. Be ready. And in Mining Complex 17, Kethra watched a human woman sing while she worked. The song sounded sad and simple, like all human music. But the woman looked at him as she sang, and she smiled. Not a happy smile, not a nervous smile, a knowing smile. Kethra felt fear for the first time in his life. He did not know why. He only knew that something terrible was coming, and the humans knew exactly what it was. He was right to be afraid. In the bunker beneath Sao Paulo, Elena Vasquez marked another day off the calendar. The countdown had begun. In 18 months, the galaxy would learn why Earth was classified as a death world, not because of its storms or predators or diseases, because of the species that had survived them all. The High Council of the Velkhari Dominion met in a great chamber at the center of their capital city. 12 leaders sat in a circle, each one controlling a different part of the empire. They had gathered to discuss trade routes and tax collection. It was supposed to be a boring meeting. Then every screen in the room turned on by itself. A human face appeared. It was a woman with dark hair and tired eyes. She had scars on her face and neck. She looked directly into the camera as if she could see through it into their souls. "My name is Elena Vasquez," she said in perfect Velkhari language. "I speak for the human species." The council members looked at each other in confusion. How was this possible? Human technology could not reach Velkhari communication systems. Human slaves did not know the Velkhari language. This had to be a trick. But then reports came in from across the empire. The transmission was appearing everywhere. Every planet, every ship, every station. Billions of screens showing the same human face at the same time. Elena continued speaking. "5 years ago, you came to our world. You killed 6 billion of our people. You burned our cities. You took our children as slaves. You called us primitives. You called us animals." Her voice was calm and cold, like ice. "You were wrong." The screen changed to show images. Human engineers working in secret factories. Human scientists studying captured technology. Human soldiers training with weapons that mixed human and Velkhari designs. Ships being built in hidden places across Earth. "You studied our history and saw only violence," Elena said. "You failed to understand what that violence created. Every war made us smarter. Every disaster made us stronger. Every enemy taught us new ways to fight." The council leader, a massive Velkhari named Supreme Commander Vorath, stood up. "Trace this signal. Find out how they are doing this." Engineers worked frantically, but they could not stop the transmission. The humans had somehow broken into systems that had been secure for thousands of years. "Your engineers are confused," Elena said, as if she could hear them. "They are wondering how primitive humans could hack your communications. The answer's simple. You gave us 5 years with nothing to do but hate you and plan. 5 years is a long time for our species." The screen showed a map of the Velkhari Dominion. Red dots appeared on it, hundreds of them. "We know where your supply stations are. We know where your fuel is stored. We know the patrol routes of your ships. We know the locations of your hidden military bases. Your slaves on 100 worlds have been sending us information for 2 years. They hate you almost as much as we do." Supreme Commander Vorath felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. Not because of what the human was saying, but because of how she was saying it. There was no anger in her voice, no desperation, no bargaining. She spoke like someone who had already won. "We offer you a choice," Elena said. "You have 72 hours to withdraw all forces from Earth. You will release all human prisoners in your territory. You will leave our solar system and never return." A council member laughed nervously. "Or what? You will attack us with your little homemade ships? We have 10,000 warships. You cannot have more than 100. Elena smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "We have 83 ships. You are right about that. But there is something you do not know about our ships." The transmission cut to a view of space. Velkhari officers across the empire watched in confusion. There was nothing there. Empty space. Then reality seemed to tear open. Light bent in impossible ways. And suddenly, 83 ugly, angular ships appeared in orbit above the Velkhari throne world. They had not been detected approaching. They had not traveled through normal space. They had appeared from nowhere, crossing a distance that should have taken 6 months of travel. Your faster-than-light technology takes ships into a different dimension and moves them slowly through it, Elena explained. Very safe, very reliable. But we studied your physics and found another way. A faster way. A way you thought was impossible. Supreme Commander Vorath stared at the screen. That technology is theoretical. The energy requirements alone would require converting matter directly into energy, Elena finished. Yes, we solved that problem too. Did you know that humans created weapons that convert matter to energy decades ago? We called them nuclear bombs. We were very good at making them. The human ships in orbit did not attack. They simply waited, their weapons pointed at the planet below. A demonstration, a warning. You have 72 hours, Elena repeated. After that, we will show you what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. The transmission ended. The screens returned to normal. The council chamber was silent. Finally, a younger council member spoke. We should negotiate. Clearly, they have capabilities we did not expect. Perhaps we can reach an agreement. No, Supreme Commander Vorath's voice was hard. We do not negotiate with slaves. We will destroy their fleet and burn their planet to ash. Then every species in the Empire will remember what happens to those who resist. He sent orders to every military base in the Dominion. All ships were to converge on the human fleet. They would outnumber the humans 100 to 1. This time, there would be no survivors. But as the Valkyrie war machine mobilized, something unexpected happened. On a dozen different worlds, slave populations began to revolt. Explosions destroyed fuel depots. Sabotage shut down weapons factories. Guards were attacked by workers who had seemed completely broken. The message had spread through networks the Valkyrie never knew existed. The humans are fighting back. Join them or stay slaves forever. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Valkyrie Dominion faced not one enemy, but many. And at the center of it all, Elena Vasquez watched reports come in from across the galaxy. The plan was working. The Valkyrie were mobilizing exactly as she had predicted. They were sending everything they had to crush the human fleet, which meant they were leaving their core systems undefended. Elena turned to her officers. Begin Phase 2. Show them what humans learned from 10,000 years of war. The counterattack had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance and watched the Valkyrie fleet approach. There were more than 1,000 enemy ships, heavy battle cruisers with weapons that could crack planets, fast destroyers with shields that could stop nuclear missiles, carriers filled with thousands of fighter craft. The combined firepower of the entire Valkyrie Dominion gathered in one place. Against them, humanity had 83 ships. Chen Wei smiled. Admiral, said his tactical officer, enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 15 minutes. Good. Chen Wei looked around the bridge at his crew. They came from different nations that had once been enemies. Chinese, American, Russian, Indian, European, African. The old borders meant nothing now. They were all just human. Open a channel to all ships, Chen Wei ordered. His face appeared on screens across the human fleet. Thousands of sailors and soldiers looked up at their commander. Today we fight not for one country or one flag, Chen Wei said. We fight for everyone who died when they came to our world. We fight for every child in the labor camps. We fight for the right to exist. Some of us will die today, but our children will live free. That is worth dying for. He paused. Execute Maneuver Thermopylae. The human fleet broke apart. Instead of staying in formation like proper warships, they scattered in all directions. Each ship moved independently, following plans that had been prepared for months. Admiral Thesson, commanding the Valkyrie fleet from his flagship, watched in confusion. What were the humans doing? This was not how space battles worked. Ships were supposed to stay together for mutual protection. Ships were supposed to follow their commander's orders. They are panicking, one of his officers said. They see our numbers, and their courage fails. Thesson was not so sure. He remembered Earth. He remembered how humans fought in ways that made no sense until suddenly they made perfect sense. All ships, advance carefully, he ordered. Watch for tricks. The two fleets met in a storm of fire and light. The first Valkyrie ships opened fire with plasma cannons that could melt steel from 1,000 kilometers away. But the human ships were not where the targeting computers expected them to be. They moved in wild, unpredictable patterns. They accelerated and stopped and changed direction in ways that should have killed their crews from the force alone. But humans, it turned out, could survive forces that would crush Valkyrie bodies. Their death world had prepared them for this too. They are too fast, a Valkyrie gunner reported. I cannot hit them. The human ships returned fire. Their weapons were crude compared to Valkyrie technology, but they were powerful. Nuclear missiles with stolen shield-breaking technology, railguns that fired metal slugs at impossible speeds, plasma weapons built from captured designs, but modified in ways Valkyrie engineers could not understand. The first Valkyrie battlecruiser exploded, then the second, then the third. Thesson stared at his tactical display. How are they doing this? The answer came moments later when his communications officer screamed in frustration. Admiral, something is wrong with our targeting systems. They are giving false information. Electronic warfare. The humans had been studying Valkyrie computers for 5 years. They knew every weakness, every vulnerability, every backdoor in the software. Now human hackers, many of them teenagers who had grown up in slave camps, sat in protected bunkers and reached across space to corrupt enemy systems. Navigation computers on Valkyrie ships began giving wrong directions. Weapons that were aimed at human ships fired at empty space instead. Shield generators flickered and failed at the worst possible moments. Switch to manual control, Thesson ordered. But Valkyrie crews had not trained for manual control. Their technology had always worked. They had never needed to fight without it. Humans had spent their entire history with broken equipment, failed plans, and impossible odds. They had learned to adapt. In the chaos, human ships did something even more unexpected. They rammed. A human destroyer, its weapons destroyed and engines failing, turned directly toward a Valkyrie carrier and accelerated to maximum speed. The captain broadcast one final message. See you in hell. The two ships met in a ball of nuclear fire. The carrier, 50 times larger than the destroyer, broke into pieces. Across the battle, other human ships did the same. When they could no longer fight, they became weapons themselves. They carried their crews into the enemy at full speed, dealing damage that could not be stopped or predicted. They are insane, a Valkyrie officer whispered. They are completely insane. But it was not insanity. It was something the Valkyrie had never seen before. It was sacrifice. Humans dying not because they wanted to, but because their deaths would save others. Because their deaths meant victory. 6 hours into the battle, the Valkyrie had lost 400 ships. The humans had lost 40. And the human fleet had fought its way through to the flagship. Thesson watched on his screen as small craft launched from human ships. Boarding pods. They were going to try to take his ship. Prepare for close combat, he ordered. But his soldiers were not prepared. The humans cut through the hull with plasma torches. They poured into the corridors in heavy armor, carrying weapons designed for close fighting. They moved in teams, covering each other, advancing steadily through defenders who had never fought in hallways before. Valkyrie soldiers were taller and stronger, but humans were faster and more experienced. Every child on Earth grew up learning to fight. It was in their blood. Thesson fell back to the command deck, but the humans followed. They broke through his final guards. They stood before him, weapons raised. One of them removed her helmet. She was young, barely an adult by human standards. Her face was covered in burns and scars. She looked at Thesson with eyes full of cold hate. My grandmother died in your camps, she said in broken Valkyrie. She asked me to send her regards. Thesson wanted to say something, to explain, to bargain for his life. But the look in the human's eyes told him there would be no bargaining. Not today, not ever. She raised her weapon. 4 minutes later, the flagship's reactor exploded. Admiral Thesson died, never understanding how his species had made such a terrible mistake. The remaining Valkyrie ships tried to retreat. The humans did not let them. By the end of the day, the greatest fleet the Valkyrie Dominion had ever assembled was burning debris floating in space. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, turned toward the planet below. The war was not over, but everyone in the galaxy now knew one thing for certain. The humans were not victims anymore. The war lasted 3 years. Every expert in the galaxy said it should have lasted centuries. The Valkyrie Dominion controlled thousands of star systems. They had trillions of soldiers. They had technology that humanity was still learning to understand. All the projections said the humans would lose. The projections were wrong. They were wrong because they measured only ships and weapons and territory. They did not measure the human spirit. They did not understand what a species from a death world could do when it had no choice but to win. Human soldiers fought for 72 hours without sleep. When they could not stand, they crawled. When they could not crawl, they aimed their weapons one last time. Engineers rebuilt shattered ships in days using spare parts and creativity. Doctors operated on wounded soldiers while enemy bombs fell around them. And everywhere the humans went, they brought hope. On conquered worlds across the Dominion, slave populations rose up. Species that had been broken for thousands of years found their courage again. They saw the humans, small and fragile, and absolutely refusing to die. And they remembered that they too had once been free. The Grix were first. They were a reptilian species that the Velkari had enslaved 8,000 years ago. When human ships appeared in their system, they attacked their masters with tools and bare claws. Thousands died, but when the fighting ended, they were free. Then the Talani joined, then the Vorshan, then a dozen other species whose names humanity had never known. Each one added ships and soldiers to the growing alliance. Each one taught humans something new about the galaxy. Within 2 years, the Velkari Dominion was fighting on 100 fronts at once. Their empire, built on fear and control, was falling apart. Supreme Commander Vorath refused to surrender. He gathered his remaining forces at the Velkari homeworld for a final stand. If he was going to lose, he would make the humans pay for every step. Admiral Chen Wei, now commanding a fleet of human and allied ships, looked at the enemy defenses. They were strong. This would not be an easy battle. "We can go around them," one of his officers suggested. "Starve them out. Wait for them to surrender." Chen Wei shook his head. "Every day we wait, their slave camps keep operating. Humans are dying while we talk. We attack now." The final battle was the worst of the war. Thousands of ships fought above the gray world, where the Velkari had first learned to conquer. Humans and Grix and Talani fought side by side against defenders who had nothing left to lose. But in the end, it was not weapons that won the battle. It was a choice. Supreme Commander Vorath stood in his command bunker, watching his fleet burn. He had one option left: weapons that would destroy his own planet along with every enemy ship in orbit. Mutually assured destruction. If he could not win, no one would. His finger hovered over the button. Then a human appeared on his screen. It was Elena Vasquez. She looked older now, worn down by 3 years of war. But her eyes were the same as they had been in that first transmission. Calm, cold, and absolutely certain. "We know about your planet-killer weapons," she said. "We knew you would consider using them." "Then you know you cannot stop me," Vorath replied. "I will take you all with me." Elena shook her head. "Look outside your bunker." Vorath activated external cameras. He saw human soldiers standing around the bunker entrance, but they were not attacking. They were just standing there, waiting. "We could have bombed your bunker from orbit," Elena said. "We could have killed you without ever seeing your face. But we did not. Do you know why?" Vorath said nothing. "Because that is not who we want to be. We came here as conquerors once, thousands of years before you enslaved your first species. We destroyed each other with weapons worse than anything you have built. We nearly ended our own species more than once." She leaned closer to the camera. "We learned. It took us a long time. And we paid a terrible price. But we learned. Vengeance feels good, but it does not build anything. We could kill you and every Velkari in the galaxy, and we would be just as empty as we were before." Vorath's hand shook above the button. "What do you want?" "I want you to surrender. Not because we will destroy you if you refuse, but because the war is over either way. Your empire is finished. Your slaves are free. The only question now is whether your species has a future." She paused. "We are offering you something the Velkari never offered anyone. A choice." The bunker was silent for a long time. Then slowly Vorath lowered his hand. The Treaty of Soul was signed aboard the UNS Reconciliation, in orbit above a healing Earth. The Velkari Dominion was officially dissolved. Its territory was divided among the species that had been enslaved. A new organization, the Galactic Compact, was formed to prevent any empire from rising again. Humanity was offered a founding seat. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, the woman who had started a revolution from a bunker, stood before representatives of 100 species. Behind her, Earth turned slowly in the sunlight. It still showed scars from the invasion, but green was returning to the burned lands. Cities were being rebuilt. Children were being born free. "We did not want this war," Elena said. "We did not want to become what we became to win it. But we will not apologize for surviving." She looked at the assembled delegates. Some were tall and scaled, some were small and covered in fur. Some had no bodies at all, just floating lights that communicated through color. All of them were free because humans had refused to stay defeated. Our world tried to kill us every day for 300,000 years. It made us stubborn. It made us creative. It made us difficult. We would rather befriend you than fight you. We have had enough of fighting. Her voice hardened. But let the historical record show this clearly. We are from Earth. We are Deathworlders. And we never stop getting back up. For a moment there was silence. Then a Grix delegate rose and began stomping her feet in a rhythm that meant approval in her culture. A Talani joined with a high whistling sound. A Vorshan flashed colors of joy. Within moments, the entire assembly was celebrating in 100 different ways. Elena Vasquez watched them and finally allowed herself to smile. Not the cold smile of a resistance leader. A real smile. Humanity had been tested. Humanity had suffered. Humanity had won. And now, finally, humanity could rest. But not for too long. There was a galaxy to explore after all. New friends to make. New wonders to see. The future stretched out before them, vast and unknown and full of possibilities. The humans had earned it, every single one of them.